Man in the window. This probably isn't nearly as scary as a lot of the stories on this sub, but it is definitely one of the creepier things I've experienced. This happened some years ago. I was 20, I think. I was going on a road trip of a sort with a really good friend of mine and his family. Our destination was a concert in a country next to ours, but we would be stopping at night to sleep in the camper we drove in. We hadn't crossed the border yet when we stopped at the first campsite for the night. Now it seemed like a pretty family-friendly and safe place, so none of us had our guards up or anything. That night at about 11 p.m. or so, while my friend and his family was getting ready for bed, I went outside to get some fresh air. Our camper was almost completely next to the beach, so I went down to the shore to dip my feet and get some much-needed quiet time by myself. On the way there I passed by a beach shack, a detail that will be important later. As I stood there, letting the waves lap over my feet, I noticed the silhouette of a man further down the beach, but it was a public space for campers, so I didn't think much of it. After being absorbed by splashing in the water with my feet and enjoying the moonlight, I decided to make my way back. Of course it was very dark given the late hour, but I don't scare easily. Now as a woman in the modern world I usually do stay on my guard after dark, but that thought never occurred to me since I felt I was in a safe environment so close to the campsite. Anyways, as I was walking back I noticed that the silhouette of the man further down the beach was gone. But even more worrying was the fact that as I was nearing the beach shack I saw that someone seemed to be trying to hide from my view behind it. Immediately I was on alert and called a friend I knew would be awake. I gave the shack a wide berth while talking loudly to my friend about how she was coming to meet me. After not too long I got safely back to the campsite and hopped in bed in the caravan. I didn't tell my friend or his family because even though I was scared, there could have been many logical, non-threatening answers to what I saw. I put it out of mind and the rest of the trip went off without a hitch. About a year or so later I was talking to my friend about the trip and suddenly remembered the creepy experience. As I told him, he slowly got pale though and told me something his brother had told him and his family over breakfast some months after the trip. That same night after I had gotten back and gone to bed, his brother had gotten up late at night to get some water. But when he passed the window right by his bed he saw a man standing right there outside looking in the window. As soon as he was seen, the man left, but it definitely creeped out the brother a lot, but just like me he seemed to put it out of his mind. Now with both of those stories it doesn't seem far-fetched that the man hiding by the beach shack had followed me back. I really am scared to think about what would have happened if I had been alone. Creepy guy hiding in garden. So this happened to me when I was 11 or 12 years old, over a decade ago, and I still remember it vividly. At the time I lived in a semi-detached house with my mom, dad and sibling. It was decent sized, but the most impressive part was the garden, which essentially had 3 levels. The first level was concrete, the second grass and the third, also grass, had my trampoline on it. At the very end of the garden was a tree embankment. The area I lived in was somewhat hilly. One morning I woke up to a cracking sound, like a snapped branch, and I was worried since a week earlier a tree from the embankment had fallen onto our neighbor's garden. My bedroom was at the back of the house overlooking the garden, so I opened the curtains to see if another tree had fallen. Instead I saw a guy hiding in one of the trees in the garden. He was pale with blonde hair and wearing all black clothing. He was looking directly at me, presumably because he saw the curtains move. He started smirking and moved his finger in a "come here" motion. I totally freaked out and shouted for my mom and dad to come into my room. I was so scared I physically felt like I couldn't move. This was super early in the morning, by the way, around maybe 5 a.m. So it took my dad a good 30 seconds to get in my room, at which point the stranger had hid behind the trees. I remember being really shaken up. I was crying whilst I told my dad what happened. He went out into the back garden to see if he could spot the guy, but he was gone by that point. A bit of time passed and I'd started to forget about it. Then about 3 months after, my mom and I were watching TV together after I'd finished school. The doorbell rang and my mom went to answer the door. I looked out the window of the living room where we were sat, and saw a white van parked outside. It was the same van as my uncle's, so I walked out of the living room and into the hallway to say hi to him. When I got to the porch where my mom was stood I realized it wasn't my uncle. It was the same guy the first had seen in the garden a few months prior, and it really freaked me out. He noticed me as I walked behind my mom, and gave me the same smirk as when he was in the garden. I wanted to say something to my mom but I couldn't, I was freaking out inside. Anyway, he just asked my mom if she wanted work done on the drive. She said no, and he left, got back in the van and drove off. He didn't give her a business card or anything. The van didn't have any company branding and he didn't knock on any of the neighbors' doors. I told my mom that it was the same guy as soon as he went, and she started to feel uneasy about the situation too. A month or so after that I got my first job doing the paper round. I had to deliver over 300 papers, with my best friend at the time. The van didn't have any company branding and he didn't knock on any of the neighbors' doors. I told my mom that it was the same guy as soon as he went, and she started to feel uneasy about the situation too. A month or so after that I got my first job doing the paper round. I had to deliver over 300 papers, with my best friend at the time. The van didn't have any company branding and he didn't knock on any of the neighbors' doors. I told my mom that it was the same guy as soon as he went, and she started to feel uneasy about the situation too. A month or so after that I got my first job doing the paper round. I had to deliver over 300 papers, with my best friend at the time. The van didn't have any company branding and he didn't knock on any of the neighbors' doors. I told my mom that it was the same guy as soon as he went, and she started to feel uneasy about the situation too. A month or so after that I got my first job doing the paper round. I had to deliver over 300 papers, with my best friend at the time. I was stalked for a month and had no clue. I walked to most places because, being severely visually impaired, obviously can't drive. I walk at night during summer, which lasts anywhere from April to October if we're lucky. This is probably not the safest idea, but I'm from Texas, so temperatures of 100 degrees aren't unusual. One of my usual destinations was a convenience store a few blocks from my previous house. I set out one night normal to get myself some Pepsi and a candy stash. Our town isn't very big and most people drive everywhere. It's very unusual to come across anyone else on my route to the store, but that night a man appeared out of nowhere and started talking like he knew me. He asked me where I was going and I told him. It wasn't unusual for people to keep watch on me because hard of hearing blind girl with forearm crutches. This guy had no reason to be there and was walking way to close beside me. He asked me where I was going and I told him, just in case I was overreacting. I sped up as much as I could since this part of the route is very dark with only a subway that had closed for the night. He definitely wasn't there for a $5 footlong. I tried to appear calm, though the alarm bells were ringing and I was shaking to the point I was afraid I'd drop a crutch, which was probably the worst thing that could right then, especially after started asking what I liked in the bedroom, and he could easily have his way with me in the ditch and no one would know. You felt sick but continued my walk. The store was only about 20 yards away. I knew the guy that was on the graveyard shift B. I got safely inside and my friend handed me a bag to carry NY stuff in until I was ready to check out, and when I got up to the register he began speaking loudly enough that my ears hurt and I had to turn my hearing aids down because it hurt my ears. "Hey sweets, did you ever find my 3DS?" I played along and he opened the half-door thing and I sat on the stool like it normal. Creepy dude came over and slammed his Bud Light, and a 10 on the counter. After being handed his change, he went outside. He's still out there by the ice machine. After about 20 minutes he still hadn't left. My friend called his manager and after explaining the situation, she told him to lock up and run me home. He did and even walked me to my door. I out the key in the door and we stepped inside. "Catherine said to give you this." He handed a keychain and showed me how to lick and unlock the pepper spray. "Call us before you come from now on. He's come in after you for the last 4 weeks." He left and I made sure every door and window was locked. So, creepy dude. Let's never meet again. Guy stalks me and my girlfriend. This happened a couple of years ago, when I was around 13 to 14 years old. I would go to Nerf wars with my friends during the weekends with a semi-auto rifle and one of those revolver-looking pistols as a sidearm. On one of those occasions, I brought my girlfriend to the Nerf war with me. For some context, my girlfriend's my neighbor, she lives in the same area as I do, and we've known each other for some time, around preschool I think. As you do for a Nerf war, you pack up spare darts, spare mags, etc. So the Nerf war ended, we had a great time as usual, and we go our separate ways. As me and my GFs walking back home, my paranoia kicks in and I have a feeling that someone was following us. I glanced back slightly, and there was a guy in full black. At first, I thought of it as one of my friends awkwardly following us but remembered that none of them was wearing full plain back, so I turn back to my GF and tell her we were being followed. She glances back slightly and sees the same guy. She starts panicking, so I tell her to calm down. It's probably just some guy going to the subway as well. So we get on the train, hoping that the man would stop following us. As I'm making sure my rifle isn't bothering anyone. I didn't have space to store my Nerf rifle even when taken apart, so I just had it slung around my waist. I feel my GF's grip on my hand tighten. Then she whispers, telling me the man was on the train as well and was staring at us. At this point, I had enough of this guy's shit. I was tired, and the last thing I needed was some dude stalking me and my girlfriend. Luckily our stop was 2 stations so away, so when we get there we bounce the fuck out of that cart. I looked back, and the man was indeed behind us. We get up the streets, hoping that there'd be at least someone or some sort of camera that would be able to see me and my girlfriend. But the streets were basically empty, with only a couple of people going back home. My girlfriend was trembling beside me, scared to all hell. I told her my plan, and with some hesitancy, she agreed to it. I stopped moving to take a drink of water, my GF shifting her hand towards my leg so it wouldn't be as obvious. It was dark at the time. I felt her hand ripped away from my leg and I heard her terrified screams. I decided to grab the closest weapon I had on me. The stock of my Nerf rifle. The stock's attached to Nerf guns with 2 clips latching onto them, so it wouldn't take long to put it on or off. My stock was pretty big. It wasn't metal, but it was a solid piece of plastic that could do some shit to someone's face. I whacked the guy around the face, grabbed my girlfriend's hand and got the fuck out of there. We waved down the closest taxi, got on and sighed, happy that we weren't being stalked by some guy. I don't talk about this incident much but just wanted to share it and get it off my chest. Because of that incident, I've stopped playing Nerf for a while. My rifle's been stored in my Nerf armory for a couple of years, untouched. Every time I think of Nerf this incident comes to mind.